And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Joint Regional Transport Committee for this first one for this calendar year. So I will start by asking Drain to do the opening karakia, please.
Good, and it's a new one for me, so forgive me if I get some of the pronunciation wrong. Tuia ki ronga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki wāho, tuia tātou te tangata, ke te kaupapa o te hui nei, ke te kaupapa o te ranga nei, Māori ora, kia tātou katoa. Translation, bind together, bind above, bind below, bind within, bind beyond, bind us the people to the purpose of our meeting, to the purpose of this day, breathe life into all of us. Right.
Thank you. Well done, Drain. So then moving on to apologies. I think everyone's here, so there's none of those. No leave of absence. Declarations of interest. Do we have any? No. Just the correction to the agenda said that the quorum is 2. It is actually 3 when we did check that out. So, and one must be from one. There must be at least one from each council. Minutes to be confirmed of the meeting held on Friday the 2nd of December 2022. Be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting. Is someone prepared to move? That was you, Mayor Smith. Councillor Hodson, you have it.
Sorry, just in those minutes, it was recorded that I was absent. I was just late to the meeting.
Can we make that amendment, please, Elaine? Councillor Hodson was actually present. It is. I've got the correct pronunciation of your name, is that right? Yep. And do we have a seconder for the minutes? Councillor Dowler. All those in favour will say aye. Against, the resolution is carried. I think, Drain, now that I don't have to leave early, we can do the presentation from Eva first. Happy with that? So, yeah, sorry, we missed the public forum, but there has been no request for a public forum. Anyone to speak? Okay, and with that, we'll move on to Emma Wakakotari.
Thank you. As usual, I'll go through our national updates and then into the regional updates. Just starting with the national.
I might get you to pull your microphone a bit closer. I noticed some of the people at the public gallery is straight into here and I are.
Okay. So the first thing here is there's been an update to our safe system audit guidelines, and this is part of the system that sits behind our infrastructure that makes sure that all new activities in the system meet the required standards for safety. And it's a really important part of our system and part of any project that applies for funding from the National Land Transport Fund. And we just really want to encourage everyone to ensure that they are informed about this and are including it in their planning and preparation for any project as part of the land transport system. Second key update, and we identified this at the last RTC meeting, that the board has made changes to the investment targets for 5 activity classes. And this is largely because projects have been delayed because of the availability of resources and the whole construction sector being under a lot of pressure. And so the board has made that decision to drop some of those targets and also to recognise that we've had lower revenue than we had forecast into the National Land Transport Fund. So there's some really key things here to factor into planning within the current NLTP, which is that we are unlikely to be able to fund any new projects in the current program. And we have a year and a half to go in that program. existing commitments will continue to be met. Given the recent events up north and the forecast for further significant weather event over the next few days, the pressures that we're facing on the fund to do emergency works are going to be considerable, and we expect those to continue through the year. So we are working in a very constrained environment. The Shiny Side Up motorcycling safety events are back up and running this year after taking a break through the COVID times. And we have one scheduled for Nelson on the 16th of February. These events are shown to have a really good take up with people who use motorbikes, and that then people go on to do some of those safety programs that actually have a demonstrated impact and decrease training. So really encourage people to come along to attend these, to see some of the experts and the other key bikers in the country, and then getting linked into the Ride Forever training program. So really encourage you to support that and promote it, because we have around 550 motorbike riders killed or seriously injured every year. And we'd rather not. And it is one of those examples of the Ride Forever program has a demonstrated effect in improving the safety of those riders. So really encourage people to get along to that. Another key step forward in our national ticketing solution, everyone that's going to be rolled out across the country, including here in the Nelson Tasman region, is that we've signed up with the company that will deliver that national ticketing solution. And then as it rolls out, will make it much easier for people to pay, to have seamless transactions and transfers between different public transport modes or different public transport services, and just reduce barriers to people easily using public transport. So it's first rollout will be in Canterbury, and then it will roll out over the next 3 years for the rest of the country. Driver licensing, we know that for young people, any people, getting a driver license is also often a license to jobs and other ways of accessing community facilities and activities and employment. And so we've been working along with MSD, ACC, police on what we can do to improve access and availability of driver licensing services, and working through some community-based trials, particularly in Taitokerau and the Gisborne region, of what works, how we can help get more people into driver licensing and then progressing through the graduated system. We've learned a lot in those processes. We've had some really good successes. Alongside that, as a result of some communities approaching us, we've been able to bring on board more driver licensing sites around the country, and test routes that can be used to sit the tests on. And so we'll be going ahead with more work in that this year, and then rolling out those improvements once they're agreed to. But it is something that's really important, and I just always encourage, if you are aware of any problems or challenges that people in your community are having accessing driver licensing, let me know, and I'll see if there's a way that we can connect into some of these programs or solutions that have already been tested. Yep.
Starting on that last slide around the driver licensing, and I've actually been just helping a young lad to get his license out of TAP. And one of the challenges is that they actually have to come right to Tahuna to do the test. when I got my licence quite a few years ago, that we used to do that in Richmond, and now it seems a backward step. No disrespect to Nelson, but you have to go to Tahuna to get your driver's licence. Yeah. Is there anything that could be done about that? Because there's a huge catchment out in the wider district, and a lot of those lads and laces wouldn't be familiar with the Tahuna area at all. Predominantly people from there come to Richmond to drive.
That's certainly something that we can look at. And we do have obviously some challenges in terms of just the quantum of testing officers. And then obviously the routes have to be specifically designed to cover the things that need to be covered. I'm not aware of any impediment to having them in Richmond from a technical perspective. I'd have to just check with the team whether there is any. But then, for example, in Upper Hutt, we had the same issue because there was driver licence testing in Lower Hutt, which is a lot further away from Upper Hutt than Richmond and Tahuna. So we worked with that community, and actually the Mayor helped us find some suitable testers who were prepared to go through the training and become testers. And we were able to then start offering those tests there. I realise it can be a real barrier for people, but in terms of the actual distance, it's probably not a huge distance, but we can certainly have a look at what's possible.
Thank you. And then just going back to the ticketing solutions, you've alluded to that it'll be nationwide. Perhaps for you, Drew, are we going to be able to start with that, or are we going to start with a B card?
So through the chair, it is a rollout around the country, and it is starting in Christchurch, Canterbury, yes, Canterbury first, and we believe we're slated to be slotted in amongst a number of other different councils in 2026. So we'll continue to use the B card until then.
Okay.
Clarify, the expected date for our own bus service is 2026. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, which seems people get used to one system, then they'll have to change, but that's the way it is. I guess you can't roll it out across the whole country unless we lobby to go start directly with it.
I think it is a big system change, but when people are used to using the B card or a Snapper or AT Hop or whatever, it's less of a change, but it just gives you more flexibility. You could use a phone or another credit card or debit card. But if you're already used to using a card of some sort, the transition will be relatively easy.
Thank you. Any Mia Smith, sorry.
Yes, right.
The title.
No, I get called a lot worse, I tell you.
Yeah.
Could I just note, Emma mentioned in her Whakatahi report some of the work that had been done on resilience. This is the first meeting of the Regional Transport Committee since the repair job on State Highway 6. I think we should note, and I'll be one of those that will challenge Whakatahi when their work is not up to standard, but the job that was done on the repair of State Highway 6, one of our most vital links, over those 7 weeks, was an exemplary job. The time frame in which it was done, I have to say I was nervous. I would say members of the community were sceptical that you could get $15 million worth of work done in 7 weeks. I'd also note that having gone through it since, the community's expectation is that Whakatahi would take the opportunity to improve the resilience of the route. Goodness knows we may have another beat on our hand next week and tick both of those boxes. And so I think it would be appropriate for the Regional Transport Committee to commend Whakatahi on the successful execution of the emergency works on State Highway 6, of which both them and their contractors did a superb job.
Yeah, and I agree. Whether we should perhaps have a resolution when we get to the regional update, because I agree we drove the Wongamara's tries last weekend, and it's an amazing job. So, well done. So when we get to the region, perhaps at the conclusion of that, you might like to move a resolution.
Happy to do so.
Okay, Karen. Any other questions relating to the presentation thus far, Councillor Courtney?
Thanks.
Good news off me, especially.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Emma, I'd like some more information about this motorcycling safety event. First of all, I wrote down there have been 550 killed each year or seriously? Thanks for that. Is this an annual event? Is it, how many years have you been doing it?
Previously, they were run annually. I'm not sure exactly how many years they've been running for, but they have been good forums to really increase the profile of Ride Forever and get people engaged
You're a main
in
sponsor.
improving safety. ACC is actually the lead agency and we support them.
Is that how it goes? Thank you.
Thank you. Just on the national ticketing solution with B card, which we currently use, integrated into that is concessions for things like super gold card holders, community service card holders. Is there that functionality within the national ticketing system?
Yes. Thank you. So there is a lot here, so I'll rattle through it, and if there's any questions, we can certainly come back to any specific issues. So starting with the Nelson Future Access, a detailed business case, and where that's at. We, as previously advised, we don't have any funding currently available in the walking and cycling activity class, and we are still preparing a funding application because that is a key component of the Nelson Future Access plan, and we want to investigate engineering options for seawall replacement, and that was a key thing identified in the plan. There are different options of the type of seawall and so on, and moving ahead to begin those investigations will enable us to do the preparatory work, so if funding becomes available, we're further along. So that's one of the things that we're currently working on. We are still working through design on the Bisley Ave Turnanui Drive southbound lane reinstatement and reviewing the safety of that. And we expect to have that work completed in March, and we'll come back to talk to council about that at the time once we have all that information available. And finally, under the low cost, low risk projects, which were part of the early implementation components of Nelson Future Access, we're looking at 3 pedestrian refuge facilities along Turnanui Drive, Annisbrook Drive, and the entrance to Maratai Street. And again, that's making sure that we're able to safely connect people across the state highway and give people safer access to school or communities that they want to move between. And so we'll be going through some targeted consultation on those in the next months, and aiming to have them installed after Easter. Sure.
Quick question. The Bisley Ave to Hunanui southbound lane reinstatement, does it remain whakakatahi policy to proceed with this?
We haven't completed our safety assessment and design, and once we have, we'll advise you what our view is on that.
Yeah, just also on the southbound lane reinstatement, are you intending further consultation for, in line with?
No.
No. In regards to the funding application for that preliminary work around the Rocks Road, is there anything we can do to support that?
And we can obviously talk to you about that as we proceed with it. We would value having the support from the council in terms of, obviously we have the agreement on the plan itself, but supporting the components as they go up for funding is really valuable as well.
And how is that sitting in terms of your prioritization?
It is still a priority for us and for the region, so we aiming to advocate for it as soon as we can find some funding available in the activity class.
And just one more around the installation of the pedestrian refuge facilities. You've got for installation after Easter. Is that soon after Easter or just any time after Easter?
Well, hopefully, if the that limited public engagement goes relatively well, we should be able to get onto that as soon as contractors have time, and we should be through some of the other work on the network by then. So it's just a matter of having enough capacity to do it. Vegetation control on State Highway 6. We have started the process of looking at what the options are to reduce the ongoing maintenance cost. And so once we have looked through those options, we'll then look at the funding implications of proceeding with them. So that obviously is a key thing that we want to ensure we have a clear way forward and agreement on the approach that's taken there. And it is a national issue, so we do need to look at what we're doing across the country and remain consistent with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Emma, I sort of get quite nervous when we talk about this subject, particularly when you go further, line 2 here, affordable, sustainable and affordable hard and soft options. I learned from you last time that a hard option is concrete or something of that nature. Is that correct? For these roundabouts?
Yeah, it could be concrete or other hard materials.
I just would like you to know, and you want feedback, and we are messengers. That's my role, and the role of every councillor here is a fair portion of our time is bringing messages back to councils. I would like you to know that in certain roundabouts and certain visual spots, the people would not be happy with a hard surface placed in certain areas. I think some greenery or shrubbery or something that's more colourful would be very acceptable, but I'm very nervous that a affordable hard option, as you call it, might be used in this day and age. We still want our roundabouts and our centre formations looking colourful and smart, so we can feel proud of them and make the community feel good. So what's your reaction to that? Would you be mindful of that when making these decisions?
There are trade-offs in here, and that's why we're looking at the options. For it to be affordable, and in terms of some maintenance costs and so on, we simply need to look at what are those options. And the long term, we need to be looking sort of more whole of life costs on those. And that's why we need to look at the options. We certainly have heard the views of people that they would prefer planted roundabouts and roadsides in many locations, but equally people are not necessarily willing to pay for that. So there are trade-offs here, and we have to carefully manage those trade-offs. Heading into this region, Richmond Programme Business Case. So again, we're looking at those short-term recommendations and what needs to be done as part of those. There is a really important piece of work that we must do this year, which is the review of the Hope Bypass designation. And obviously, if we want to maintain the Hope Bypass as a future option, as it is in the Programme Business Case, we must retain that designation. So we will be preparing to lodge that in August. And then we're also looking to ensure that the recommendations from the program business case will go into the state highway investment proposal, which then comes into the RLTP process. And we're also really wanting to ensure that we're really well joined up on the urban planning, so that as growth occurs in this region, that it connects into the program business case in terms of the investment priorities that have been identified there. State Highway 65, obviously we had the fire earlier in January, and there was quite a lot of joint work with fire and emergency to manage that, and having to close the road at times. So just real appreciation to our contractors and also fire and emergency for working together and making sure that our travelling public weren't put at risk while that fire was brought under control. And State Highway 6, Waller Street in Murchison, we have had some problems there with the resealing works, where we've seen some flushing occurring in hot weather. The contractor's been managing the situation during summer while they're investigating what caused that to happen. And once that's happened, the contractor will then remedy it.
Thank you. Mayor Smith, I think you have got a question.
Yeah. Let's clarify. With the code guidelines, of which I understand through these part of that 250 million, with it being within the long term. I'm sorry, I'll repeat again. With the Hope bypass and it being in the long term options as part of the Richmond program, am I correct in saying that the construction of that work at its earliest is scheduled for 10 years' time, 33?
Correct.
I'm really worried that the level of congestion and traffic pressure around that point of State Highway 6, does Whakakatahi have any plans for road improvements for our major both vehicular traffic in the interim that is going to make some difference for the huge problems that there are already around Queen Street, Richmond, State Highway 6?
So the interim plans are as in the short and medium term parts of the program business case.
Last question. One of the things that is contributing to the traffic pressures around that Queen Street is the growth of the Richmond West population that are entering in from that point. And it was identified that hundreds of traffic movements were associated with getting kids to school because people are understandably really nervous that when it's congested, busy, it's not as safe. Has Whakakatahi had any dialogue with the Ministry of Education around the transport importance of getting that Berryfield school advanced as quickly as possible?
Not to my knowledge, but I'd have to go back and talk to our planners.
Could you clarify? I think there's a bit of a, my frustration is that the lack of progress on getting that school done is contributing to
Traffic.
both from a safety and a traffic point of view, and that can we try and get a transport lens as well as an educational lens over getting on and getting that school constructed. The land was secured 4 years ago, and my view is that the Ministry of Education need a push and a shove to get it going.
Emma, you'll look at that. Thank you. Any others relating to that page? Councillor Ellis.
Sorry, also Ed though. Yeah, some of the issues in that area. It also there's increased development further out, which contributes to that congestion. And with the issue with the schools, the Ministry of Education will also amalgamate some other schools into that area. So it will also create some, it's not going to just solve what's going on there. We're going to increase traffic from other areas as well. So it's quite a complicated situation that won't necessarily be solved by bringing that school program forward, which they are. My indication from a recent newspaper article is that there's not a driving want from the Ministry of Education to move that along much faster.
Yep, original speed and safety. So you'll be aware that we released our interim speed management plan with some, particularly mainly around some of the schools where we were proposing to bring in variable speed limits during the times where children are going to or leaving school. And we also had the intersection speed zone at Ellis Street on State Highway 6. So we've had quite a bit of feedback nationally on these proposals. And so we're looking at all of that feedback now, and then we'll be making an update in the next few months about which ones of those will go ahead. We did get some questions about why some schools weren't in there, for example, Tahunanui, and Tahunanui already has a school speed zone. It's not at this consistent speeds, but as it's already got a safety treatment, the priority is to some of the other schools that don't have a safety treatment. And we also had to look at what was the capacity to actually go forward and implement all of these, because we're obviously rolling this out across the country. And we know that most regions are very keen to progress the school zones as quickly as they can. And if they're not done under the interim plan, then they can certainly be put into the full speed management plan, which we'll be consulting on this year. And Ruby Bay Bypass, we've installed the wide centre line there when we did the major reseal late last year. Now, wide centre lines are a really good intervention to actually reduce head-on crash risk, but it's also been placed in there so that at some point in the future we may put a wire barrier there, which then really almost removes that head-on crash risk. And I don't know if any of you have seen it. We posted a video that a truck driver sent us recently of a near miss on State Highway 1 where a car lost control and would have hit the truck if that median barrier hadn't been in place. And they're incredibly effective. So we are looking at some funding for that if that's available. But having the wide centre line means it's very easy to implement that in future.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Emma, you did mention just a moment ago presenting Tahuna School and their school zone there. Can you throw any light on why Auckland Point School, and you'll know where that is on Haven Road, or at the roundabout there, the Haven Road roundabout, hasn't got a school zone? Auckland Point Primary School, it's a kindergarten as well.
I don't have a specific detail on that with me, but as I said, there's a range of factors. It may have been where their primary entrance is, or it may simply be that there wasn't capacity to do every school in the region.
Thank you. Could you come back to me on that?
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, just after you put the wide centre lines on the Ruby Bay bypass, the local newspaper rang me and said, what's going on? And I said, well, logically, if you think about it, there's probably going to be a fence put down the middle of the road due to the fact of the way it's been marked, etc. And I suggested that they may have rang your office to find out if that was true or not, because I wasn't going to tell them that it was. Obviously, they haven't communicated because there's been nothing in the paper about it. So, yeah, and I also made a comment, if we don't get the fence down the middle of the road, we could all end up driving at 80k if we're not careful. And I said it seems to be a thing around the country when the fence goes up, the speed limit can remain at 100. If it doesn't, it gets dropped to 80. I made a comment that when the road was opened, talking to one of the engineers, that road was designed with the speed, average speed of 130k, it could be. That was the design of the road to allow, that could never happen, but it wouldn't happen in New Zealand, but that was the design of it. So I said I'd hate to see it go to 80K. Just for the fact there's no fence, but it'll obviously be subject to funding. So I said to them I would mention it at this meeting. I presume they might ring me sometime again if they haven't rung you. So I'll tell them to ring you again. I'll just say when funding's available, we might see a fence. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And just a couple of questions from myself. Just in relation to the interim speed management plan around Ellis Street intersection with State Highway 6 and Brightwater School, it continues to be a thorn in the side of the Brightwater community, that whole intersection. And you've heard it raised previously by Tasman councillors. I think you were looking at putting a variable speed in there, weren't you? Is that likely to happen in the foreseeable future? And would it include the intersection itself?
Yes, so the proposal in the interim speed management plan is to put an intersection speed zone there so that it will drop the speed when vehicles are looking to turn in or out of Ellis Street. So that is what's in the proposal at the stage.
Right, thank you. Would that include over like River Terrace Road or the state highways, or just?
I'd have to go back and check the actual delineation of the zone, but I can check that for you.
And then just Councillor Dowell is talking about 80, and I've had a number of requests, and at one time you did talk to us about looking to review the whole of State Highway 6 from Wakefield South, and I've had a number of people ask me about that lately. Is that likely to come on your radar in the foreseeable future? I think at the time you talked about you'd even probably review it right to Murchison or Springs Junction.
The plan for the full speed management plan will include what our proposals are for all state highways. And the next, it's a 10-year plan with a 3-year work program, essentially. I can't recall where exactly State Highway 6 sits in the priority for that, but that will be something we're coming out for a full consultation process this year.
Would you be able to have a look at that program and perhaps let me know? And myself anyway. Thank you. Any other questions relating to that page? If not, we'll move on, Emma, to Golden Bay.
Don't pass too quickly over Tasman. So a bit of a good news story following all of the work we did jointly with Mana Whenua Ki Mohua. We have seen much fewer issues with freedom campers, and I think everyone worked really well together on that, both in terms of the landscape plan, but also in removing it from the freedom camping websites and other things. So we're going to be continuing that work on what else can be done step by step to put that landscaping plan in place. And obviously quite a lot of that will come from funding sources that aren't Kotahi funding sources, but we certainly are committed to supporting the ongoing work because it is such an important area to so many of the local community and everyone who wants to have that access for picnicking and fishing and boating and so on. So just really nice to see that work actually being effective in terms of maintaining that access for the local community. And State Highway 60, High Street, Motueka. So the remedial works on those safety crossings was completed before Christmas, and there's a few minor works still to be completed, but we are seeing that they are working much more effectively now, having addressed the concerns that were raised with us by the local community. So that should all be working effectively now.
Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, I'd like to say that the negativity about the new roundabout now has down to 10%, probably, if not less. The only thing that's popped up in the last couple of weeks, I'd like the raised crossings to be better identified. Especially, well, some people just say they hit them before they realise they're there. we're seeing some skid marks on the white lines on the eastern crossing, so there's obviously been some near misses for some reason. But overall, the whole high street itself has performed very well. We had one little glitch with the traffic lights at Tudor Street, but that was only a day thing, I think. I've spoken to Andrew about it earlier. The locals are definitely enjoying the fact that they can get across High Street safely now instead of putting their neck on the line or having to travel all around town turning left to get to where they want to go. So yeah, overall, the money was well spent, and hopefully the outcome will be good. We've had 2 vehicles completely written off on the roundabout, but that was before the current modifications. Our prominent businessman and the next businesswoman had come to a head. Neither of them were injured, thankfully. Just their pride. So yeah, no, overall a good outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to hear the feedback.
Yeah, no, it is the whole way of things working a lot better now. Yeah.
I think it is one of those things that's, you know, obviously it was something the community had sought, those changes. And while we can't design every bit of the system to cope fully with the peak, so you're still going to get a certain amount of congestion in the summer peak. But if it's working better, if it's enabling people to move around in a safer way, and then off peak, obviously it will, you know, be working consistently well.
The fruit season will be the one to see how it goes with all the trucks.
Thank you. I will carry on.
So as usual, we have a range of low cost, low risk activities underway. So we're continuing work on State Highway 6 Whakatu Drive Shared Youth Path upgrade, and we're just doing those initial investigations and then talking to the different stakeholder groups and the iwi liaison and identifying what they are. And I think we've talked about this before. There's quite mixed views, both in terms of what should be done in terms of the level of service that cyclists would like to see, but also how we work in that sensitive marine environment. So that those things are all being factored into those discussions and considering what we do. A State Highway 60 rural school bus stop safety investigation. So we've had some issues identified from the local community with concerns of kids having to cross State Highway 60 when they get off the school bus or getting onto the school bus. And so we are looking at what options there are to do some work around signage and making sure that we give as much warning to other road users that these are bus stops and to expect that there's going to be buses pulling in and out, and obviously there may be children about as well. And finally, we are looking at some areas of shoulder widening on State Highway 60 between Parapara and Collingwood for the late summer season. And these obviously, they improve the resilience because they create a slightly wider road environment and also improve the amenity for cyclists as well. But these are part of the program where we like to see our road, effective road area nice and consistent throughout the region.
Councillor Butler, I thought you'd have a question about that.
Oh, not about that. That's great news, actually, and I'm sure the cyclists will be pleased. Yeah, my question was in relation to the school bus stop safety investigation, and when you say school bus stop safety, are you referring only to children having to cross the road, or are you including the degree of risk of some bus stops where children are having to wait beside, for example, a deep ditch? You know, there's big ditches on the sides of the road in some places, and there's nowhere for them to stand. I'm just wondering how broad that risk assessment is, whether it's limited to kids crossing the road or.
There's a range of factors that will be taken into account, so they may be different at different sites. We have that challenge on that section of State Highway 60 that those ditches provide a real barrier to being able to widen the road there. So looking at where we can make improvements to bus stops is certainly part of what we're doing. But I don't know exactly which options would be looked at for each one. But we can come back once that work's been done.
That would be good, thank you, because it would be good to see risk as well as high use in the
I think this item was in particular was to the on the Ruby Bay bypass that Councillor Turley had raised and ex-Councillor Turley had raised a number of times around children having to use the underpass, but also got full of water. I think that was the issue.
There's been a number of sites where public and councillors have raised issues. So yeah, there's multiple locations. Now onto our reseal and road closures that are coming up. So one of the things I'll try and do in these updates is give you some early heads up of things that are going to be happening in the future. They may not be fully locked in at this point. We might not have dates, but there will be some things that we're just giving you a heads up on. So I'll identify those as we go. So currently we've got daytime work happening on Takaka Hill. And then there will be later in February and March some overnight closures where we asphalt on the corners of the Hill Road because we need to be able to have the whole road off to get that work done. Now, they will be scheduled. We will have a opening at 1 a.m. each night, and we'll be working with all of the trucking companies and communities to make sure everyone's aware as much as possible. We're always able to maintain emergency service accesses through these closures, and again, we work with people, but we've found in other parts of the country where we do this, as people get used to this, we get into a pretty good rhythm of people expecting it and being able to work through it. We've also got some resurfacing works in Takaka, and there'll be some delays there, but obviously that's a much more manageable process. And then we've got State Highway 6 to Hunanui and Gladstone Road, which is starting on Sunday to have resurfacing works, and there will be some disruptions and stop goes and so on as we go through that. And but there are alternative routes available for people in those closures. And State Highway 6 Rocks Roads, at some point in the second quarter of the year, we will be doing a Sunday day closure for a tree removal and cliff scaling works. And as we work out when that's going to take place, we'll obviously go through a full communication process and to let people know and to manage the impact that will have. It is really important. We need to get a crane in there for tree removal, so it will be something, and we if we can do that and the cliff scaling works at the same time, that just minimises the impact on the travelling public. We're getting there.
Yeah, just quickly, the night closures, the actual time of closure is quite significant, and we had some variations in the past. It went from 9 to 8, so PM closing, and that makes a big difference to people. So if there's any possibility of keeping it at 9, I think it's much easier for the community.
I'll work with the team on that. She says, looking at the team.
I just note that on the Te Hunanui State Highway 6 resealing work starting on the 12th of February, we have got a clash with that exact period when the Opera in the Park, which is a huge event. Is there any way that just on that Saturday evening, it would be possible to work with the contractors to minimise that disruption? It's one of the largest.
What's the date of that?
19th.
The 18th.
5:30.
yes, I'm sure we can work with.
Yeah, just be a matter of them having, give the contractors a Saturday night off, they won't complain, they'll come enjoy the opera.
Yeah. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. That was part of the query that I was going to raise, but also just particularly raised by our Te Hunanui liaison, Councillor Rollo, just around the communications of work such as this taking place in Te Hunanui and the impact on particularly the businesses there. And so I suppose one question just around how that might impact parking along that particular strip.
And obviously when we do a resale, we can't have cars parking on that section of the road. And so the contractors will go out and give the notices to those affected properties along there and advise them when they're expecting to do those sections and so when that impact will be there. So that is part of the process. Obviously, we can't have vehicles there because of the need to have it clear, and we don't want also to have any damage to vehicles that are in the too close to the ceiling work. So it is an important thing. We do need to do it, and so it is a relatively short time frame, and it won't be every part of the road the whole time.
Yeah. Carry on. Yeah, like different formatting on it. Yes, at the bottom of the last page.
So we have bridge deck works that are required to be done on this bridge, and it's a single lane bridge. So we will have to do a closure, and we're anticipating it will be a full 4-day full closure to get that work done. We are still working through all of the actual methodology to confirm that. It is a long diversion route, and so this is quite a significant one. And so as soon as we have confirmation on the methodology and that closure process, we'll then be engaging with the road users and the communities that are impacted by that. So that's a really key one. And we're also expecting to have some more full closure, night closures for Taka Hill on the pre-winter maintenance program, and a closure likely in April on the Whangamars to complete some minor work following the emergency repairs. And again, those will be well communicated and signposted to people.
Carry on, Emma. I think you're getting to the important stuff now.
So just a brief recap on the works on State Highway 6. Crikey, the end of last year was a phenomenal time, and I think I know that it's already been raised by Mayor Smith. The contractors and the team involved did a phenomenal amount of work and really stepped up to the challenge that we put to them, which was firstly that we needed to get those repairs underway in case another event hit the region, in which case we would have lost a significant amount of road. And this is the exact challenge facing our friends in the upper North Island over the next few days, where cumulative impact of major weather events is likely to cause significant damage that will be much more challenging to repair. But the team really stepped up and stood up to that challenge, and were able to complete the works, but also those 20 culvert replacements that we had identified to improve resilience at the same time. And while we will always learn more about how to get these things even better and better when we have to go in and do such a significant program of work, it has been, I think, an enormous relief to everyone that work was completed and that it was able to be reopened in the timeframe that it was.
Right. So I guess this would be an appropriate place, Mayor Smith, if you wanted to move the resolution in relation to congratulating NZ or thanking, or both. I'll leave it to you to.
Leave it out for the official time. I move that the Tasman Joint Regional Transport Committee congratulate and positively its contractors and road works teams on the efficient and effective emergency work done on state highways between our time and particularly for completing works in 7 weeks. I just give you a copy.
Yeah.
I do want to actually mention, yes, good on the guys that was those workers that were doing 14, 16 hour days from morning to night to enable us to be able to have it done. So I mean, not do this way. That's appropriate for me to move, and I'll give the score notes.
Elaine, and I'm happy to second it and endorse your comments. I think it was a great effort. And as I said earlier, seeing the results is really incredible. Yeah. And like a lot of these projects, it's a huge amount of money and a lot of it's under the road. You don't actually see or below the road, but even the surface is great. So well done. So with that, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour will say aye. Against, the resolution is carried. Thank you. So carry on there. Yeah, and thank you so much, Emma, for that.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, I think you've still got some Tasman emergency works to cover off.
Yeah. Yes, there's ongoing work, but most of this is well on track for completion. So the State Highway 65 Shenandoah dropout, that's nearly fully completed, and obviously we're able to keep access going through that site. The Dello Bluff underslip on State Highway 6, we've just got that retaining wall piling to be completed with minor traffic impacts. And then as we complete that work, and you can see it in the top photo there, it'll be able to be done into 2-lane access. The rockfall work on Dello's Bluff itself is ongoing, and we may well need to get back in there and do some more work later in the year, but we're able to keep the 2 lanes open there. And obviously the blasting that was done last year removed a significant amount of material, including a rock that managed to get through 2 container walls. So very pleased to have that gone. And Birds Hill overslip. So that's that long-term displacement that we see there. So we're got that diversion in place so as we can continue the geotech. That's a very challenging site. And the dropout, we've got the work underway to fill and stabilise that underslip so that it'll be completed by the end of February.
So once again, it's a great effort for those Tasman, and particularly those Murchison jobs. It'd be good to get them completed because they have been around a little while, and particularly now that you can pretty much drive everywhere with 2 lanes most of the time. Any other comments or questions before we wrap up Emma's update? It's not, so thank you. That was a great effort, and thank you all for your questions. And we'll move on to the next agenda item, Drain, which is your terms of reference. And councillors, it's on starts on page 24.
I've got 21 on the
21, is it? 21 in the hard copy. Actually, it is 21 on here as well.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is just to formalise a discussion really that we had with you in December last year around changing the terms of reference, or requesting the council's change the terms of reference for this committee. There are kind of 3 major elements to those changes. The first is to include a non-voting Tūtau iwi representative on the joint committee. The second change is to recommend that this committee make its recommendations on essentially the 3 statutory joint plans it has to do to the joint council committee. At the moment, the default would be that we go to all this work together, then staff go off and seek separate approvals from their councils on the joint plan. So much like the FDS, the Future Development Strategy we did last year, this is suggesting that if we do joint work together, then probably the logical place for that those joint plans to be considered as the joint council committee. The third change to the terms of reference suggested is around the governance, operational governance oversight for public transport. We're essentially saying it's a joint service, genuinely is, and this committee is well placed to oversee that. And a bit like the joint plans, if there is, I guess, some scope for this committee to make some decisions to support operations. And if there's anything else that exceeds that authority that isn't related to budgets, it also goes up to the Joint Council Committee. Again, thinking together. There is one exception to that. It doesn't suggest that either this committee or the Joint Council Committee make decisions that effectively change budgets or exceed budgets approved by the individual councils. And that's essentially because it is still the prerogative of the full councils of each council to make budget changes and so on and so forth. So that's probably the one main exception. There's a couple of things to be aware of. Those joint plans that we talk about, the Regional Land Transport Plan and the Speed Management Plan, we're very conscious that the respective council bodies will have a high interest in those plans. And so through basically workshops and things like that, we will make sure as staff that the full council bodies keep informed and have that opportunity to have their say and feed into the thinking that is ultimately reflected in the joint plans that you promulgate, consult on, and ultimately recommend it up to the Joint Council Committee. We want to make sure they're not left out. Other than that, I'm pretty happy to take questions. Just one minor thing, we've added an extra, there's a few tweaks to resolutions, I think, right on the board. One of those includes a request that the chair can make a few tweaks to the suggested terms of reference after this meeting, because when I went through it all yesterday, I noticed there's a few improvements we can make. Nothing detracts from the suggested changes there. It'll just be better expressed in the terms of reference before we put up to the two councils for consideration.
So open for questions, commenting, moving, debating, whatever you like. I'll start with you, Councillor Dale.
Yeah, I'm happy to move as it is, please.
Move. I just do wonder at 3 if it should be the chair and deputy chair, so that there's one from each council.
I will just see clarification. Has Nelson City Council appointed a deputy chair yet
For this committee.
No, we have not. The presumption in my discussion with Mayor Tim King was that I would serve in that role, but that would be something that will need to be formalised by the council.
Right.
I can see the deputy mayor, he's such an ambitious young fellow that he may have a different view. We'll have a caucus.
for the purposes of
We'll have a sort out on that and inform you. Can I just check on one thing? I'm very happy with the terms of reference. I think you've done a good job of pulling it together. I'm strongly in favour of the terms of reference having us report to the joint committee. And the reason for that is that I think you get into difficulties if this body makes a recommendation, Tasman does one thing to it, Nelson does something different, and you're in a different position where if we're in the same room together, we can hear those different perspectives and try and resolve it in one. So I think you've done a good job of that, totally support it. My question, does the terms of reference for the new Joint Regional Transport Committee go to each of the individual councils or to the joint meeting? Could you just clarify that legal question in terms of their adoption?
Yeah, so at the moment, as I understand it, they have to go back to their respective councils. So our council will be considering this request next Thursday, and Nelson City Council will consider it next a convenient meeting for you. Certainly, it should be able to be all packed and tidied away by the time this Regional Transport Committee meets there.
Drew could just note from the Nelson City Council side to get this onto the next agenda and for us to deal with the issue of the deputy.
Yep. Thank you. Were you happy to see?
And I was happy to see it.
So, right, we've got Councillor Dowler, and any other comments or questions? Just a question from myself. The non-voting iwi representative, how would that be appointed? Or selected, for the want of a better word?
The conversation I've had with Jenna, and we probably need to have the conversation with Tanya as well, is simply to put the request out to the iwi chairs and GMs to consider the matter and put a nomination forward. There's kind of a wider issue. I know that the team are looking at around how iwi representatives go on to our standing committees, which is one of the for Tasman that we also have, and that process hasn't been put forward yet. And I believe there are job descriptions, effectively position descriptions being drafted. So we're just going to pull into line with that process.
Can I just make on a process question?
For sure.
Can we just leave Tasman to lead that process around the iwi appointment? We have our own process too for our own individual appointments. Because you're the administering agency, it would be easier from our perspective that Tasman just takes the lead and consults us after. So our expectation is that we'll go to the iwi, ask them to make a nomination, and for Tasman to completely run that process.
We're happy to. Well, as a courtesy, we'll make sure that Nelson City staff are informed and kept in the loop.
Thank you.
And I think the important thing to appreciate from these terms of reference is for us in Tasman and Barrow, we had a number of other external parties, but and Councillor O'Neill Stevens was wrong, where Nelson previously just had elected members and no advisory members as such, where we had a number. And this term of reference, you might just want to cover this off as well, Drain.
Yeah, so I'll cast your mind back to the workshop we had last year, and there was some discussion around non-voting representatives for different sector interests and stuff like that. Look, from what I recall, the conversation landed with we need to form strong relationships with all of the diversity of sector interest groups, whether they be walking, cycling, I forgot the name of the trucking association, AA and others, and that we need to make sure that we keep them informed, keep them engaged with this process, invite them to make presentations and have delegations to present on issues that are important to them. So make sure we keep up the engagement without having the same formal structure that we did last time.
Mayor Smith.
Yeah, can I make a suggestion? On our formal agenda, we have the opportunity for a public forum. What I'd like us to do is, having made the decision not to formally have them, because the difficulty is if you have one, then you end up, to be fair, having to have them all. I would like us to proactively to speak to the Road Transport Association, the AA, the cycling and walking groups, and ask our officials to line them up to progressively as a new regional committee to ask them for a 15-minute presentation and introduction for us to get to know them and them to know us.
And their presentation rules do allow that much better than a public forum, because it gives us an opportunity to have a longer presentation and times for questions.
So can I just make the suggestion that we ask our officials to identify those organisations and start doing one each? If you have a big batch of them, you'll almost get lost. This is a long-term piece of work that we've got to do around developing the regional transport plan. I reckon if you had about 15 minutes for each of our meetings this year and progressively invited them, would be a good way to get engaged with our work.
And I'm not sure what it's called now, but what was formerly the Nelson District Health Board, they were one of those parties as well. So
what we'll do is I'll have a chat with my colleagues, identify those groups and start reaching out to make sure we don't slow the process up. We'll start bringing those folk in. I love the suggestion at the next RTC, and we'll also canvass the list with you for the remainder at that meeting as well, just to make sure that we think we've covered off everything.
that's a good idea. Thank you. Anything further on the terms of reference? If not, Councillor Dowler, would you like a right of reply? That'll be fine. I'll put the resolution. You're all aware of it. All those in favour, please say aye. No, it was Mayor Smith. And all those against? The resolution is carried. Thank you. Now, I think the next item is the public transport update, which is on page 33. It's Drew, I think that's in your name, and Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bryan. I'm not Drew Bryan, I'm Mark Parfitt, but Drew's done a lot of work today, so I'm sharing the load. I'm going to take the report as read, but I do have a brief summary and just a couple of updates to provide you with. Drew touched on it earlier this afternoon. Patronage is really encouraging for our public transport service at the moment. So November, December were higher than any previous, and that trend is continuing for January. We strongly suspect that the half price fares have got a lot to do with that. And since writing this report, the Ministry of Transport has further extended half price fares until the 30th of June. Now, that means that the Community Connect launch will be delayed. That's the half price fares for community service card holders. It will be a permanent thing. So that's going to be delayed, but we are continuing to beaver away behind the scenes, getting our concessions loaded onto B cards and so on, and we'll be well prepared for that when it happens. With regard to the new bus contract implementation, that is summarised in attachment 1. I know it's hard for you to read if you have printed this out on paper, but we were hoping that you were going paperless and you've been able to enlarge it on your screens. So I do apologise if you're trying to read that on paper. So with regard to branding, we have made some progress, and I'm going to get Drew to cover that when I've just finished going through the summary. We do want to show you some samples concepts, and I'm going to hand over to Drew shortly. With regard to the interchanges or bus hubs, work is progressing really well at the interim bus hub at Nelson City, and that's going to be the old Street site, the SBL site, the current bus terminus, which Nelson City Council now own. And just to update you on the report, SBL have been very gracious in allowing us into that site before official possession date, which is July, so that we can get ready for that launch. So we are working hard there. The Stoke hub is proving a little more challenging with regard to where we can accommodate bus stops and then more importantly get the bus to turn left into Songa Street past the Turf Hotel. That is a challenge. We're working really hard to try to find a solution for that. The worst case scenario is that we may have to delay that part of the change service. So both buses may continue down Main Road Stoke for maybe 2 months until we get that sorted out, instead of one of what, just for those of you who aren't fully aware, the new contract has the buses splitting at Stoke and one going down Songa Street and Nayland Road to service that part of Stoke and the other continuing down Main Road Stoke. If we can't resolve how to get the bus around that corner before the 1st of July, that might just become a later Stoke improvement 2 months in. But that's plan B, which we're still working hard on plan A. We are still in discussion with Nelson Airport. They are very strongly in support of us taking the bus down there. And what we have learned is that we are going to have to alter some curbs and some of their speed humps and ramps. So there will be an infrastructural cost to that, but we have the funding to do that, or we're confident that we do. So that's still a work in progress, but we're confident we'll have that ready by the 1st of July as well. With regard to the policies, they are quite self-explanatory at the end of this report, but I do have Officer Sue McCauley with us in the room if you have specific questions about either of those. So right now, I'll hand over to Drew to take you through the branding information, unless there are questions on anything I've said so far.
Do we have any questions? Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Thanks. Just around the section, the fit out, wherever that was sitting. So it discusses the sort of implementation of electronic ticketing. Are we, with the new buses, are we retaining Wi-Fi provision across there?
The Wi-Fi provision will be on the new buses.
Yes, and so that'll be part of fit out before their introduction.
Yes, I mean, the B card needs GPS locations, and yes, so yes, right.
Any further question? Mayor Smith.
Has consideration been given to this quite unfortunate timing where the new bus service is going to be established on the 1st of July, exactly the same day as we remove the half fares, such that the confusion is in the public's mind on the very day that we're wanting to launch the more frequent and better services that we have effectively got these increase in charges. Is there any way that we can avoid that? Because I just think it's not quite starting on the right note, and I suspect it's more a matter of bureaucratic bungle than necessarily being a good timing.
I totally agree with you, but we did not foresee them extending the half price fares. We got that note came from the Beehive at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, and we were scrambling. So 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, when we had for months been planning the beginning of a new contract on the 1st of July. So it's happened very recently. How we could get around that, I think we're going to be launching a vastly improved service. It's still going to be electric buses, increased frequency, going to the airport, going to Mapua, going to Wakefield, Motueka. It's still a very good thing to be launching, and at the same time, Community Connect. We'll just have to make sure that we frame our communications around that really well, that the Community Connect card will come into effect, assuming they stay on time with that on that day, which is a permanent fare reduction for community service card holders, and that the cessation of half price fares is linked to a national subsidy, which is also linked to, a removal of a petrol tax, or, it's out of our hands locally, really, when they stop that.
The only thing is, sorry, that might be worth mentioning is that this is a third time it's been extended. And I guess there is every possibility that the government might choose to extend it again, maybe to October or something like that. Who knows? In the future.
There's a way of
I don't know that we can change our plan. We've got a very definite
Can I
plan.
just answer some of this as a serious question? Because I'm worried of the mixed messaging. What would it cost per month to extend the half price? Do we have the choice as to councils to increase our level of financial support to avoid that?
Well, with the new bus service, we are going to a changed fare structure, and that's outlined in the fare policy that's attached to this report. So that is a flat fare of $2 if you're travelling within the urban range. It's more if you're going to beyond Brightwater. Half for community service card holders, it'll be half of that $2 fare. So I think there's still good news here. It's still a changed fare structure. It's not going to cost you $4 to get between Nelson and Richmond. It's going to cost you $2. And if you're a community service card holder, it's going to cost you $1.
What can you just, I know it's quite complicated. I've got the fare structure in front of me and I was trying to work it out. What portion of bus users, in rough terms, are going to face an increase as they go from 30 June to 1st of July? Won't most passengers? I know the new person coming in is not going to notice. I haven't got a bus service in Wakefield, so my price is not going up. It's just that I've got a service down to pay a fee. My question is, for existing bus users, aren't the majority of them on the 1st of July going to have an increase?
If you just give me a minute to indulge. As you can see, it is quite complex. If we could just either adjourn or provide this information back to you.
What I'd like you to do is go away, do some more work on it, because it doesn't seem you've done the numbers, and I think we should discuss some options. I think this is a new development. It's caught us a bit flat-footed, and that we should think about the implications, including the option as to well, I'm sorry, we do have other choices to avoid it. So I would like some work on some options as to how we can alternatively manage the transition and communicate it.
So yeah, at some stage we will have a agreement or complete most of the meeting and come back just have it. Think about that.
Yeah, that may include making a case to the government. Actually, you've got a big investment alongside the councils. Could you make a special case for Nelson Tasman to just extend it a month or two so that you don't get the confused messages associated with the doubling of the fares and the new service coming into effect? They're the options I want to explore.
Councillor Hudson, you had something.
Yeah, that the comment around the changing fare structure was the comment that I was actually hoping to make. But it might also help to highlight that in the regional public transport plan, there's a customer mix diagram that points to 40% being concession holders and 18% being super gold holders. So they would cover, they'd fall under the half price. I forgot what it's called, but the ongoing half price public transport.
Through the chair, Super Gold card holders will continue to travel for free at off-peak times between 9 AM and 3 PM and after 6 PM or 7 PM. So they will continue to travel for free, and we are issuing them a second B card that will be able to load their Community Connect concession onto if they qualify, and that's sort of if they have a community services card, because not all Super Gold card holders hold a community services card.
Margaret, Drew, just got a quick question. One of the reasons that this fares policy came to this meeting was because you wanted a sufficient lead in time to lock in those fares, do the necessary publications, designs, etc., so that it was a seamless rollout. 1 July, everything was in place. I note that first question I have is, would a delay until the next RTC, which escapes me exactly what it is, till May, would that compromise the implementation? And I guess the second thing is an observation. Whatever we're discussing doesn't sound like it'll be a permanent fare change. It is a temporary one at best. And what's being asked of the committee today is to recommend a permanent fare structure to its two respective councils. So the two things that are being considered aren't mutually exclusive. The committee today can approve the permanent fare structure, which is the one that will be enduring, let people get on with the work, and staff can come back and consider the question that's been raised in the subsequent meeting. Could you comment on that, please?
Through the chair. One of the things that we have to do, and one of the reasons we include the fare structure policy within this meeting, is that we have to load the fare structures on the new machines, that's the ticketing machines that go on the buses, in April, May of this year, while they're in Otago. The way that the system works is Otago buys them in, they do all the setup for us, and then they send them to us to install on the buses. A delay of the fare structure will compromise that somewhat, and we'll struggle to be able to meet our 1 July deadlines of getting everything installed on the buses if we do delay that. It's not to say we can't do it, it just compromises it.
Are we being asked to formally approve the fares today?
Through the chair, yes, the formal, the fares policy is attached to the report. We are, as Mr. Fletcher has pointed out, is the enduring fares policy that we're asking you to approve.
And just to be clear, that's a recommendation to the two full councils at this point, because we don't have delegation to do.
We don't have an approved terms of reference yet. So the actual approval of the fare structure is really a recommendation to the joint meeting of the two councils. So there is time between now and then for us to review it. The drop dead date for the new fare structure being successfully loaded onto the new fleet of buses is what date? In April or May? Do we have a date?
Through the chair, we don't yet have a date. It just depends on the import. We're importing the machines from overseas, from Germany, I believe. And so we're just beholden on those arriving in Dunedin and being preloaded. But we do know that it is a tight time frame to get those preloaded and back to us to install on buses.
And am I correct on page 47, if we are being asked to approve the fee structure, that there's just a typo with respect to the 3 zone fare? Yeah, on page 47, where we've got the fee structure, it seems that there is a typo in the fare structure. On the 3 zones fare for full fare.
2 cents?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, look, in my view, they're all rounded numbers. They're not even 2 cent coin. I'm meant to be paying cash, and I'm
Yes, your worship, you are correct. That is a typo.
Right.
I thought I think in the master document it's been corrected, but in this PDF, it's obviously.
Well, if we're going to adopt it, I would like to adopt it correctly.
Just to clarify, in terms of the process, what you're being asked to do is recommend it at this point. The thing is, it's being recommended to each council independently at this point. So just to clarify the process, it'll go to Tasman next week and it'll go to full council Nelson, whenever the next council meeting is.
So it's not going to the joint meeting of councils, it's going to the 2 individual councils.
Correct. Once one of the subsequent changes that would need to happen to the joint council committee terms of reference is which will follow on, is to change their terms of reference to receive recommendations like this or make final determinations. You'll note in the terms of reference report we just talked about is that permanent fare changes still not within the scope of final decision making of the joint RTC. It was intended that that goes up to the joint RTC when it's within, sorry, the joint council committee, when it's within budget, and if it wasn't, it would still go back to the separate councils. That's why I stressed the point around if it's something exceeds budgets or is inconsistent with budgets. Yeah. So today though, it's to go up to the two separate councils. Probably the best way is to note a correction in the resolutions to the 3-zone fare from $9.2 to $9 or something like that, and we'll just follow that up with the final document.
Yes. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you through the chair. Can you please tell me, I'm sorry if I've missed it earlier, what is the current fare between Richmond and Nelson at the moment?
That's depends on if you are paying cash or if you're using a B card. Depends on if you're an adult or a student concession child. So you're asking for a cash fare as an adult between Richmond and Nelson?
Really what I'm looking for is an indication if the $2 fare that it will become is significantly different to what it is now with the subsidy.
So through the chair, at the moment, an adult fare if you're paying cash between Richmond and Nelson is $3.50. If you're using the B card, it's $2.80. So you're saving 80 cents.
It's not going to be significant. I think my impression was that the intent was that you were worried that the fares would be significantly higher once the subsidy came off, but it doesn't look like they're going to be at all. So it makes it a moot point.
So through the chair, those prices that I gave you are the current full prices that you have to half that to take into account the 50% discount. So that $2.80 that I talked about with the B card, it's actually $1.40 at the moment. So you're going from $1.40 to $2. So it would, from a passenger perspective, it would be an increase. Yeah.
I think with like the likes of the 2 cents, we can cover that with a minor amendment clause in the resolution that be corrected, and then the others that we find. But Drew, did you have anything further you wanted to tell us before we go to the resolution?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to turn your minds to the branding. I have passed around a set of documents from a graphic designer that looks at branding. Now, just to be clear, what I've passed around is something that Nelson Tasman have been working on for quite some time, and that's to create a shared transport brand. With the intent that it trickles down not to just the public transport services, but other things like the regional land transport plan, like the regional speed transport plan, and all those other documentations, but also some of the key messaging that we do out to the community as well. So this isn't just public transport. This is a wider transportation, Nelson Tasman transport brand. So what we've got here is what we've been working with our iwi partners on to get a name, and the name is Te Awa Tika, which broadly translates into the right path or taking the right path. And so that's kind of our key direction with the transport, the changes that we're doing in our transport networks at the moment. The symbol that what I really want to do is draw your attention to the page that has the bus on it, which is page 5. That's the one, yes. So through the chair, that is our new electric buses coming along. They are the Futon electric buses that we've got coming, and we have overlaid what this branding could look like. So this is not a final design. This is a first cut, and what that could look like. And what you can see there is that we are intending to use the brand element, which is those pathways converging, as the main thing that goes on the side of the bus, and the Te Awa tika is just a byline to that, effectively.
Now, the danger here is this can become very subjective. Everyone has a different opinion, so.
Yeah,
So this is only a draft, so you're telling me it's not fine.
that's correct. This is a first cut from our graphic designers. It's to set direction, and what you can see in subsequent page, the next page actually, page 6, was some of the other options that we went through before landing on what we've got to here. And you can see everything is pointing to the right for obvious reasons. We discounted both of these because we want to be able to use this symbol on signs and signs that are directional signs, and we just didn't want the triangles being confused with arrows when we're putting it on signs. We also put it in a circle. Circle was a typology that seems to be used around all public transport. If you think of London Underground, that's got a circle. AT Transport has circles, Orbus, all around the world. Circles are used around transportation. So that's an element that we also wanted to incorporate into it. That brand of the effectively the paths going inside the circle is something that we can put in front of a name. So if we're naming a bus stop, we can use that in front of the name of the bus stop to link it into the wider transport network. And we'll use that symbol on the side of the buses as well. Please be aware, what we're seeking today is just an indication about whether the RTC is, and excuse the pun, going in the right direction.
My question is this intended to supersede the current branding of NBus?
Through the chair, that is correct, yes.
What is your understanding of who gets to make that final decision? You're saying today, no, it's not a final decision. Who gets to make that decision? We're on quite a tight timetable. Actually, it's if you're going to get uptake of public transport services, getting the marketing part of the equation is actually important. We're all collectively, as elected representatives, accountable to that. So I come back to my question. Who has the authority to tick off on the changes in name and branding of the new bus service?
Through the chair, I might offer a suggestion here. One of the changes, the recommended changes in terms of reference, is to make decisions that support the operations of the public transport network. So in the future, hopefully in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, if there was any confusion about which committee or which committees it needed to go to, I'd say that's dispelled. It would, at the highest level, it would need to come here. It potentially could be considered an operational decision. If it's just you think it's something important, then I think after we've got those terms of reference changed, we can bring it back here for final ratification. After the terms of reference have been approved, because that specifically gives authority for this committee to make decisions supporting operations of public transport. The only thing I'd need to ask those guys is if, because the next meeting's in May, is when it needs to be finalised, because obviously the buses need to have the image overlaid on them and such like.
Yeah, so through the chair, the buses will start to arrive. These brand new electric buses will start to arrive in April. And so shortly thereafter, we'll start to apply the graphical items that are going onto these, as well as the fit out with the GPS, the Wi-Fi, and everything else that we've talked about previously in this meeting. I think this can be applied fairly quickly, so we don't need a decision here, and we're not, and through the resolution, we haven't asked for a decision. We have effectively put this in front of you to get a direction about, again, excuse the pun, whether we're going in the right direction, whether you're happy with the direction we're going with this.
Sure. My perspective, and I expressed concern last year at our first meeting, that the implementation of the new bus service on the 1st of July is a huge and critical undertaking with big demands on staff, but also important governance accountability for elected members. I do not think a 2-month frequency of meeting is adequate between now and July for us to give the level of governance oversight to critical issues like the fare setting and other parts of the new bus service. I think we have two options going forward, in my view. Either you increase the frequency of the meeting, or alternatively, will delegate to a subcommittee of elected representatives the role to be able to finalise some of these details. Otherwise, I think we've got two possibilities of getting stuck. Either one, insufficient governance oversight, and then officials being forced to make decisions that then may get into difficulty as to their appropriateness. It's not appropriate for elected representatives to get into the operational detail, but I'm sorry, setting things like fares and those sorts of things are public policy, not just for officials. Or the second is that we miss timetable. That is that the officials are stuck in a position of having to get buses commissioned and fares loaded up. So, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that either one of those two courses of action, I think, are required between now and July for the governance of our two councils to provide the level of support for us to get there by 1st of July.
Top of my head, my last stuff, how difficult would it be to meet more frequently? Because I think that's probably Elaine, Drain.
I guess the first thing I will defer to Elaine on that, other than to say that limiting meeting schedules to Thursday and Friday is proving challenging. And I think if that was something that Nelson would reconsider for this purpose or the joint RTC, that would make their lives a little easier to find a date that would work. I guess I would ask Marg and Drew to outline what decisions at a governance level you think are necessary between now and 1 July for the successful implementation. The fares policy has been considered today. That's a pretty important element. What else might be needed, if anything?
Bus colours, livery.
So yes, the fares policy, the branding, this branding is around an overall transport brand. It's not necessarily, it's what we want to use on the bus, but it's not the name of the bus. I mean, we might just call it the bus. We used to call it the bus. So we're not, when you talk about replacing in-bus branding, in-bus is in-bus. That is very Nelson-centric. We think we need to move away from that. We're using, but I still think it's an operational decision in terms of what the new service is called. And we're not calling it anything here. We're just wrapping it in an overall sustainable transport brand that's been in development for some time. But your question is, what governance approval do we think we need?
I think the governance oversight, I'm sorry, is more than that. I'm getting questions from the public as to where are the bus stops? Is there going to be one at the hospital? What is in terms of the electronic information for when the buses are coming that we know is an integral part of making those services? Now, it's not a matter of us wanting to dig down into actually deciding where the bus stop might be, but I do want governance reassurance that the key parts of the service are being put together. And I'm not satisfied in the two meetings I've had of the Regional Transport Committee, given the scale of change that's being proposed for the 1st of July, that we have adequate governance oversight.
So through the chair, you wish that's what this traffic light system was about, giving you the oversight that we are working on bus stops, real-time information at those stops, where the routes are going. And I suppose I'm saying if there was a significant change to anything that we've been working on, that or a significant step away from anything that's an RPTP, we would be coming to you. I'm saying, trust us, we're implementing stuff that's already been talked about. There are no significant changes. The routes, TDC's officers are working on where the bus stops are going on those routes. The routes on the Nelson side of the boundary are as pretty much outlined in the RPTP and in other documents we've brought to governance in the past. The bus stops are that's very operational, turned from Hale and I into formal bus stops. That's all happening. We will be bringing to the Nelson City Council hearings panel formalisation of bus stops, because that is a parking and vehicle control bylaw schedule that needs changing. So There's a lot going on that this is a summary of.
I realise that. I say it again, and I don't apologise for it. I am not giving an adequate level of governance oversight of what is a very substantive and probably most important transport initiative this year. I'm sorry, I've heard from public officials, and it's not to be critical, it's to simply say to do my job, is that the notion simply trust us. I'm sorry, it is not adequate in the sense that if things do not go successfully on the 1st of July, I'm sorry, myself and my other elected representatives are those that are accountable.
Well, through the chair, we're happy to meet with you and put items in councillors' newsletters. If you want more week by week updates, we can provide that.
I think what Dan's saying is that he thinks there needs to be more meetings, discussion around these things as we go forward.
I do wonder, Mr. Chairman, whether you would be prepared to consider a public transport implementation subcommittee.
Well, that is an option, yeah.
And my view is that what the advantage of that would be is I actually think it's a very challenging time. I'm not trying to be tough on officials other than really wanting to make it work. My view is that between now and the 1st of July, there's a whole lot of moving parts that do need to be getting right. And sometimes it's just a matter of being reassured that those things are occurring quickly. And my view would be that if you had simply an interim committee to operate between now and when the new service is implemented, would enable us to have a greater level of confidence that all of the things that are required are being done. And so that would be my preferred approach. It would help resolve some of the issue of trying to get meeting times that work for everybody, and it will enable a bit more detailed scrutiny of what I think is required for the governance and the Regional Transport Committee to be reassured that we've got all our ducks in a row for this to be the success that we all want.
Wayne, did you have some comment?
Yeah, through the chair. Look, I think we've heard the Mayor. There's a lot of operational decisions that need to be made and expedited pretty quickly in the next 4 months or so. I hear the Mayor's request to understand better about how those are going and to be reassured more than he is today that things are tracking along, and to have more meetings in the 5th of May and the next one after that is, I think, is in June, before we get there, so that you can be reassured and be provided the information you need to satisfy yourself that things are on track, and if necessary to pass on to constituents and members of your community. I'm not sure a subcommittee would be right. This is actually a reasonably small committee in of itself. It is actually the size of what we'd normally consider a subcommittee. And I wonder if we can either, just as you suggested, pencil in another RTC meeting or even a workshop, because a little workshop's a lot easier to get in, where we can cover that topic specifically between now and the 5th of May, if that would be acceptable.
You know, if we held an official meeting, that would mean Waka Kotahi would have to attend too, wouldn't it?
Yes, our workshop, Emma's always welcome to attend as well, but we can be a little more flexible on the format in a workshop. Yeah, the only thing is, my suggestion is easy to implement afterwards. If the committee view was to delegate a subcommittee, as the Mayor suggested, that probably would require a resolution to do so. So if that's the preferred pathway, it needs to be addressed at this meeting.
Yeah, my suggestion would be that we pencil in a briefing or a workshop, but also I think that, you know, this kind of governance oversights typically, you know, you'll be covered by your chair and your deputy chair. So perhaps on Nelson's side of things, the appointment of that deputy chair will help expedite that regular communication with staff where those operational matters, but that sort of reach that point of flagging would normally go to that chair and deputy chair. And I think that that might also be a way of just helping to bridge from here until July 1st without having to, get into vicious negotiation of calendars, which is always a fun one.
So are you comfortable, Mayor Smith, if we leave
Look,
it
I've made my point. Leave it to the chair as to try and
Chair and
program
staff
something
and
reasonably relaxed.
Yeah.
But I do think that the transport staff that are working jointly on this need to understand that there is a proper role for governance to be able to check that a project in scale of this size is progressing on site. And sometimes that's just about asking the questions of the various components of it, including the question that I've raised about this unfortunate coincidence of the half airs disappearing, and quite quickly being able to explore as to, well, is there any other options of which we could avoid that, rather than just sort of, well, actually we do have options. And that's where I sort of see a governance group. So need not take it further. Let's do the workshop in the event that we get to the next meeting and a subcommittee seems to be our option. Let us cross that bridge if necessary at the next meeting.
Okay. Councillor Down.
I just have a question regarding the pretty pictures.
Yeah, that's where we were.
I see we've got Nelson City Council logo, we've got Tasman District Council logo. I don't see a Waka Kotahi logo anywhere involved. It's that, I would feel that would be an issue that should happen.
Because there is significant subsidy, isn't there?
Yeah, through the chair. Look, this was deliberately a transport brand between the two entities. Yes, a number of different items that is undertaken in the transport space is supported by Waka Kotahi. If that's something that this committee would like to see included on that, we can look to that. We'd also have to talk with our Waka Kotahi colleagues about whether they would be happy to include that as well.
Just to pick up on a point that Drew made earlier, some of this branding will apply to transport initiatives that the two councils undertake that have no bearing or relationship with Waka Kotahi. So without trying to not give Waka Kotahi due credit for public transport subsidies, that could create some confusion in the public's mind if we start slapping up a three-way sign as a standard on, for example, some of our internal cycleways.
I don't think Councillor Down was quite meaning that. So
Can I ask a question? Who made the decision that there would be a new common branding on all forms of transport between Nelson and Tasman?
So through the chair, that was a decision that was made at the regional public transport plan. So that's included in the regional public transport plan.
And in that regional public transport plan, understand that, but this is now being extended to not just public transport, but all elements of transport. My understanding from the briefing that we've received is that this branding is to be applied to non-public transport services.
That's correct, yes.
So my question is, who made the decision that there would be a new common branding across public transport and other transport services?
It was a combination of communications with communications officials. So communications officials from Nelson City Council and Tasman District Council believed that it would be better to talk about wider transport initiatives rather than just public transport.
I'm sorry, I'm going to call you up.
Sure.
That is a governance decision. What you've just said to me is that the decision that was made with respect to a common branding across public transport and others was made by officers. Do you understand my point?
Through the chair, yes, I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm just relaying what was
That, I'm sorry, reinforces my point that there actually needs to be a greater degree of governance oversight of some of the work. No, it's not for elected representatives to decide whether it might be this colour or this brand on this bus, but those substantive decisions are governance decisions.
Through the chair, look, one thing I will reiterate is that the intention to do a joint branding site for the public transport services was part of the plan. If there's an issue, it's the logical or at least perceived logical extension of that branding to other types of joint communication, transport communication branding. So I take your point on that. But the public transport, the core of this around the public transport, that was flagged at the plan. So staff have just been implementing what they thought was the plan.
I'm not questioning the fact that there was a proper decision of the Regional Transport Committee to develop a brand for the brand service. I read that and applied that. The first I've heard today that new branding was going to be applied to other elements of council is today. And my understanding is the advice I've had is that it is a decision that's been made by officials. Well, I'm sorry, it's not appropriate for decisions to simply make that decision that they are going to extend and go beyond the brief of where the Regional Transport Committee had previously been.
I might be able to help with this in that this isn't something, at least for me, and in the role previously with the Infrastructure Committee, this was not something that was without governance oversight. This was flagged up. I know at the previous mayor and deputy mayor were aware, as well as the chair and deputy chair of the Infrastructure Committee, with the idea that these conversations would be ongoing and that, you know, that basis of a brand for public transport could grow across, but that the work regardless was supported by resolutions of Regional Transport Committee and Nelson City Council.
I'm happy to stand corrected if there's a resolution on the books. So I'm sorry, just having some discussion that there might have been, I'm sorry, substantive decisions need to be recorded. And if there are decisions before I became mayor, where you can show me a resolution that was made, I go, fine. It's on the public record, elected representatives made a decision. If there's no resolution, I expect officials to come back to the elected representatives on a substantive decision of that sort.
So through the chair, no, there is no resolution from a wider transport perspective. There is the public transport as previously discussed, but it's just been discussion with elected officials.
Those motorcyclists that we should be sending for training.
Certainly the branding was discussed at the joint regional transport, but anything further than that, councillor Gallagher, we haven't been part of that as far as I know.
Go to Tasman for the wider signs.
Through the chair, I mean, to be fair, I think there's a lot of business conducted at council that's by way of direction and then discussion and businesses transacted that way. So this is just one area, obviously, where there is where staff have moved on, and I don't want to speak for Nelson City Council staff, and that's, you know, their prerogative. But in our area, we have a lot of conversations and a lot of things happening with some comfort taken by conversations with elected representatives. And I think that's probably just the comfort we've taken in terms of progressing with this. That's no longer the case in this particular issue. Then we'll go back and reconsider our options.
Well, it seems to me you've got two options, and that is if you wish to proceed with that, provide us with the report and provide us with the advice why you wish to go down that track. I'm quite happy with that, but simply go ahead without the governance team is incorrect, in my view.
So once again, to cover that afterwards. Now have to look at whether that can be put out the 5th of May and then come back before
that. Look, through the chair, I'll deal with the report first. The report actually doesn't deal with the branding in any way. So I don't think it necessarily holds up the decision in front of you today around the fares policy or the advertising. The advertising, by the way, is not about the branding for Nelson Tasman bus services. It's about whether you can put up what kind of material you preclude from going on a public bus service, mainly. In terms of the discussion around the extension of the Joint Council Sustainable Transport branding, look, we will have to come back to you. And perhaps the best way to deal with that is, in the first instance, because it'll be the first meeting we have together, is through that workshop that we just talked about on the public transport implementation. We can follow up more formally after that. Marg, did you have any further comment on that?
I was just thinking about the public advertising guidelines. Is there anything we need to be aware of?
Through Mr. Chair, we haven't had a policy in the past. We've had guidelines, and it's really just forms that something more formal, but it also is very cognizant of feedback we've had in the past. Te Whataora or the previous Nelson Marlborough District Board had approached us with concerns about some of the advertising that was being carried on the back of the buses with regard to nutrition and healthy living. So we have taken that feedback on board and pulled it into a more formal policy, whereas previously it was just a guideline.
The one question I had on the advertising guidelines as to why would we ban political advertising on our buses? I've often seen, look, I'm not particularly interested in doing it myself, I assure you, but this is saying that, in my view, political discussion, if people want to express a view and to say that whether it be a political party or whether it be a cause, might be Greenpeace, might be any issue, I'm totally of a view that they need to meet the normal code of conduct, which is provided by the Advertising Standards Authority. And that does deal with issues of inappropriate advertising. But do we really have to go into, my view is that expressing views of whether it be save the forests or those things, isn't there a boundary of going beyond freedom of speech?
Through the chair, I think it was easier to leave it out than to put it in. If we put it in, it's sometimes contentious, it's subjective. I've experienced personally concerns raised about some of the things that have been on our poster bollards when you start to get political. And as an officer, I'm uncomfortable approving some of that stuff without a governance direction. So it was just easier to leave it out and say we've always.
I've seen
councils. We're apolitical as officers.
And I accept that. And so is the Nelson Mail or Television New Zealand, or I've seen buses all over the country that have had advertisements of political causes or political parties or candidates. And that is why I wonder why it is necessary to exclude them.
We lifted most of this policy from ECAN, so I think it's the stance that they take.
Right, where to from here?
Yeah, sorry, through the chair. The reason why that was, we felt that should be included in here, but again, this is the governance aspect of it, is whether you want it included or excluded. But we wanted to include it just because the perception of something on a bus that council looks after, either endorsing or not a particular political view or party, personal party. Again, more than happy for that to be changed. This is what we're seeking, is the guidelines to be able to enable us to either accept or reject a political piece of advertising. Sorry, not political, but any type of advertising.
Through the chair, in terms of way forwards, I mean, I'll just say that there's an obvious risk that's been trying to be hit off here, which is that there might be a perceived association between the bus service and, let's say, local politics, ending up on the bus or something like that, rightly or wrongly. It's not as black and white as a paid advertisement in a paper or something like that. And I know that that objectively that would not be the case, but it's about perception, and the perception being potentially, for example, one or more local politicians using the platform and being seen by the public potentially to be getting some kind of special treatment, and maybe even being seen to abuse public transport services for political promotion or attacking opponents. That's the obvious risk that's trying to be headed off here. In terms of a way forward, if it's a view of the committee that's something they wouldn't recommend, then I would suggest we amend the resolution around this particular item to say excluding the prohibition against promotion or attack on any political party, and we'll amend it. that's what we'll do before we put up to the councils.
What are you going to amend it to?
You would simply remove that last bullet.
No, I would remove the words promotion or, so it reads attack on any political party or person. I don't think it's appropriate there be any attack ads from anybody. But for people that want to promote any political party person, it's in the, you've got this margins of free speech. It's a bit like when the Tasman District Council allows the New Zealand First political party to use your hall, are you endorsing the New Zealand First party? Of course not. You're just allowing them to use that hall. When a bus that's not owned by the council, but owned by a contractor, sells advertising on the back of that bus, do we want to prohibit the New Zealand First Party being able to put an advertisement on that bus? My view is, I'm sorry, democratic elections and different political parties advertising what they stand for, I don't think is a difficulty. So I have no difficulty in excluding the attack. It's the other parts of which I think are legitimate parts of protections. And I even would go so far as I'm not sure it would pass a Bill of Rights test. That is, the Bill of Rights provides a provision that says the right of political expression and those things is a basic human right.
Councillor Neil Stevens.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be more comfortable keeping it in, and I think we're on that slippery slope immediately, even going that we'll let you promote, but we won't let you attack. When if you were to have an attack ad up, it would still have to meet all of the tests of the other advertising standards. If I want to take out an ad that says, you know, New Zealand First wants to keep the pension age the way it is, as a bad thing or something like that, or they want to lower it. I'm not sure what their latest policy is. You know, suddenly I think we're getting into this very complex thing. But what I'd also highlight is that, you know, one of the very first lines we have here is around harming our reputation. And I think, you know, the key thing is that I do think that when you've got our branding right next to, say, my face, you know, I'd be taking that advertising out because everyone who enjoys riding the bus is going to associate that with me. And I personally don't feel comfortable having access to that kind of advertising whilst also trying to make decisions on the future of our bus network. As someone who advocates very strongly for, you know, increasing the frequency and changing the routes, if I then stick myself up on it, I feel like all of that comes into question of, oh, was the frequency and routes just to get a little bit more airtime and publicity? I think that we just open up this can of worms, which really isn't necessary in the provision of what is a fundamental basic service of transport and accessibility for our communities. And, you know, I wouldn't be comfortable removing it today. I think if anything, if we're worried about an NZ Bora test, then we should test that. But we shouldn't be making a change like that on the fly without fully interrogating what it could mean.
How are you thinking we would test it though? That's the challenge, I guess.
Well, that's when you grab a lawyer and you pay them far too much money.
Yeah.
So just as a question, do we have advertising guidelines at the moment for the N buses?
We have guidelines, but they're not policy, so they're fairly loose.
And how does this policy vary from what is currently on the N bus guidelines advertising?
Well, this is formalising the guidelines into policy, and it's the same. So the guidelines prohibit, or not prohibit, that's the wrong word if it's a guideline. We don't currently accept political advertising. So this formalises the existing guidelines.
The document we have before us says public transport advertising guidelines. That says to me they're staying as guidelines.
But we're asking you to adopt it as guidelines. Okay, so let me rephrase that, Your Worship. The guidelines are not written down anywhere that I'm aware of. They are SBL, our current operator, understand what they can and can't accept, or their third party does. If they have an approach made by somebody they're not sure about, they generally come to me and I or to the officers, and we acid test it against our thinking. What this document does is it places our thinking into guidelines in a more formal way. So We can say policy instead of guidelines.
You know, your recommendation to us is guidelines.
Okay, so they're
Is there-
guidelines.
And just a simple question, is there a written guidelines currently?
No,
So this is new. Is there currently an advertising review board?
no, the policy or the guidelines, the document proposes who that is, and that's outlined in there. So there is not currently an officer. There is no.
I'm not feeling comfortable approving these today.
No, I'm just thinking that we may have to even take them related to the guidelines out of the resolution. Trying to drive.
I am, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to put up an amendment to the resolution that would deal with near next concerns that was supported by the committee. Basically, it's slightly odd wording because you're talking about precluding something from the list that would not be appropriate, so it's a double negative. But trust me, that wording there means that where we talk about promotion of the political party would be removed from the things that we know. That's what that does.
As I've further discussed it,
Yeah,
I just sort of feel that that's a minor bit. I've now been able to get a clearer idea that we haven't had written guidelines before. We're looking to establish a new policy and approach. I genuinely feel this needs more work. I do not feel comfortable approving it today.
so we can take the commentary related to the advertising. Come back.
If that's to be the committee, we can, that resolution can certainly be struck. And the PS policy can be still.
Here's the bit that I really would test is have council officials given consideration to simply using the New Zealand Advertising Authority standards. The difficulty I have is, look, everybody's going to have different views about advertising. There's a national system there about what's appropriate and not appropriate. The alternative public policy I would like to test is to simply say that the bus operator will provide by the Advertising Standards Authority and be a member. That what it is, the Advertising Standards Authority is an organisation that a member becomes a part of, as if they're involved in advertising. They have a code of ethics. They have a proper complaints process. And I wouldn't mind just testing as to whether us creating just for a relatively small amount of bus advertising, a whole new system for trying to introduce standards when there's an alternative system that we can just connect the bus operator into.
through the chair, I think that we do reference the advertising standards policy. The reason we are going beyond that is because we've had feedback in the past, and it's all about that perception that the council operated bus service endorses the advertising on the back. It's a perception, and that's why we've had feedback from the past health board about advertising sweet and sugary drinks and junk food, and that's why we don't allow sort of, Steinlager to take out an ad on the back of the bus. It's about that perception that we're endorsing that. So we deliberately have gone beyond, because those things all meet the advertising standards.
I'm asking a question as to whether we really want to go beyond. We really want to be the regulator.
Well, that's where the past councils, the previous council had indicated to us that they wanted to see a tightening up of the advertising that was on the back of the buses based on feedback and submissions that had been made by the health board in particular. So they asked us to develop this.
The health board's asked, you're allowed to say, we're also allowed to say, thank you for submission, but the answer is no.
And thank you. With respect, this has been put together based on the guidance we had from the previous council that they wanted to see more.
Right, I think to move forward, we'll take the bit about the advertising guidelines out, because it does need more work, it seems, one way or another. And I'm just thinking about painting of the buses. But perhaps that's another thing you can bring to the workshop in between now and May at the latest for a formal resolution, I guess. Just thinking out loud a little bit, I hear Drew, how soon are they like to want to start painting the advertising on the buses?
So through the chair, the buses will come fully painted from the factory. Now, when I say fully painted, I'm saying a flat colour, and it's the blue colour that you see here on these
Okay. So
diagrams.
the advertising will go on later.
What we're talking about with the branding and advertising is effectively a printed transfer or printed wrap that goes onto the vehicle.
Right.
So your question was, how soon will they want to know? They'll want to know as soon as possible so they can have it ready to go. But I think the more pertinent question is how soon do we need to give them? And I think that's where, when the buses start arriving and they're getting fitted out, that's the appropriate time to be able to apply the branding. Not necessarily the advertising, that might not have that ready, but certainly the branding.
Right. So I think, yeah, we'll postpone the further decision around the advertising guidelines for today and take that out of the resolution.
So I think that through the chair, I think the team have done that. So all that is strike through all the references to the advertising
Correct,
guidelines,
yeah.
so you can resolve the rest. The rest is struck out.
Right.
If that's
So
what you want to do.
is there any further questions related to any of the other things? So I just want to cover that subsequent to this going to the councils, the discussions around fares and these type of things, we'll be able to make the decisions here without having to go back to the respective councils, whether that's individually or jointly. And how?
Yeah, so so there are some things that will still need to go for final decision making to the joint council committee. The joint speed management plan, the joint public transport plan, and the joint regional land transport plan. But those will all ultimately be decided if the councils accept the change to the terms of reference to those bodies.
I was particularly referring to public transport.
Operational policy decisions that will be able to be made by the joint RTC again if they accept that. There are some things that precludes those. So one of the things is that the joint RTC wouldn't be able to make a decision that would be inconsistent or exceed budgets approved by the two councils. So that's just a logical protection. It's pretty much the case for all other standing committees as well. Most other decisions should be able to be made. There's even some ability to do non-permanent changes to fares and routes and things like that, but the permanent changes to fares, permanent changes to routes, that is probably something you'd still expect to be recommended up to the joint committees, probably because they have permanent budget implications. That was it.
Nice, thank you. Any further questions, Councillor O'Neill Stevens?
Just one on the fares policy, which is one of the fare principles is rewards frequent and regular use. In terms of the policy as it currently sits, how do you see that principle coming through?
Through the chair, it's the use of the B card. That's a regular, frequent user, and they get that discount. Yeah, I think Project Next, which is the national integrated ticketing that Ms. Spate referred to earlier, has the ability to build in things like a capped fare. If you travel certain times, maybe 60 times a month, they stop charging you after that. But that's part of the next iteration that was not possible under the B card and the RIT system. So that's the next step. But right now we refer to the B card and the discount they get.
Thanks.
Right, if we have this room Councillor Brown, who was in the second on that, Councillor Stevens. Any debate, further discussion? If not, so we're moving the recommendation for number 3 taken out of it as priority for now, and some meetings to 2 and 4.
Sure.
So Councillor Brown, was five. I'll put the resolutions. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Against, the resolution is carried. Right, well, there's your minutes. Take that. Right, I didn't have a point to like the volunteer or Brian to
All right, I'll give it my best shot again. A new one for me. Kia hika te korero, kia watia, kia ma Kia mama te manawa o te tangata. Kia uke te ara mo tātou e ora nei ko rongo ki ronga. Kia tina hui e tai ki e. Let the discussion be lifted. Clear away the ease and hearts of people. Keep focus on the path of life. Peace is upheld. Say yes, bind together, and so on. It's